We're live. Woo. Hello. I
Okay.
told you we're live. I
Do you know
literally said
what?
we're
You've
live.
just done these for so long now
Yeah,
without me
yeah,
that
I just know.
like you just know. You
Yeah,
just
I just know. I
you
just
just have
know.
you just have the knack. Hello, welcome to a very special and it would appear disorganized, but very organized. Very organized.
So
Um
organized.
Dangerous Dialogue, all about voting because tomorrow is the general election in the UK and we want you to go and vote. If you are an eligible voter, all we want you to take away from this is you should go and vote. We're not telling you who to vote for. We're not going to sit and say that you shouldn't vote for one party or the other, even though clearly we have our own opinions about that. We just want you to go and vote. So if you've tapped on this video and you're waiting for the next hour of this chatter to hear what the point is, that's it. That's the point. Go and vote.
You can
Tomorrow,
leave now.
take your ID along and vote. um, we could introduce ourselves, but we've done this a million times. I'm Tom. I'm the artistic director of Car Crash Productions, and you are.
I, I'm Zoe. I am a usual host of different podcasts for Tom, also a friend, and just someone he contacts when he needs help.
Just
Just,
facts. Just, um, great. So we're gonna zoom through, no pun intended, a bunch of topics that are all kind of surrounded in the idea of voting, because I think there's a lot of things that people do and don't know about voting and the things that are associated with it, and I think particularly as this is at least in the UK, really, really, really important election compared to some that we've maybe had in the past. Even though it feels like there's already a solution, if you will, there's already a resolution. That's the word I'm looking for to what's going to happen tomorrow. People, I think, have made a pretty educated guess as to who will be the prime minister by the end of the week. It still matters who your local MP is going to be and if they are going to listen to you, if they're going to hear your voice. Um, let's start easy. Zoe,
Mhm.
I'm asking both of us.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
When was the first time you voted?
As soon as I could. I think, you know what, I can't remember what came first, if I turned 18 or if the Scottish independence vote was, because when was that? When was this?
That was
20.
2016. No, that was Brexit. Um,
So I think it might have been, it was one of the other. As soon as I was old enough to vote, or it was the Scot, because I definitely voted in the Scottish independence referendum.
yeah,
So yeah, the first time I could vote after I turned of voting age was when I voted, and I voted every time since. I've
nice.
always voted. I've never not voted, even if I haven't felt like I was clued up on what was going on in politics and manifestos, etc. I always voted because I felt like regardless of how I feel about people or how I feel about how the election is going, etc. I always want to be able to use my voice while I have it, even if I don't feel like I properly have it. Because
Absolutely.
if I don't use it, I definitely don't have a voice, you know? Uh, so yeah.
I looked it up just now as you were speaking there. It was 20. I've already forgotten the year. Where's my brain at the moment?
It feels like it was like 2015, 2016. That is when it does feel like
Yeah, so I've lost it now. I think it was 2014. Yes, 2014 because
2014. So
it was pre-Brexit because a lot of that conversation
yeah,
about Scottish independence after Brexit was because it changed the circumstances, right?
yeah.
But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No,
Yeah, I am in the same position as you. I voted every time there is something to vote on in the
yeah.
UK since
You've
I've
just
been.
been able to vote for longer than me because you're older than me.
Yeah, but also we're from Scotland, so we can
Sure.
vote from being 16.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, so the first time I voted, I think I was 17.
Mhm.
Um, and that felt particularly important because I now live in England and have for 7 years.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, that's just really hard to process. But part of that is the youngsters that live here still can't vote until they're 18.
Yeah,
Um, so it's interesting that between the two countries, even though they're so intrinsically linked, who is allowed to vote is actually quite different.
yeah.
Um, would you say that you voted in everything that was a general election, or just everything full stop, everything that you could physically vote in?
Everything that I have received a vote for, regardless if it's general or if it's just local, I have voted for.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm too like that. It's interesting. The reason I bring it up is because a mutual friend of ours and I had a conversation recently that they don't vote in sort of local elections. They would vote
Hmm.
in general elections because they just feel like it doesn't matter who runs their council. I couldn't disagree more. But because his point was that he felt like they didn't have that much power, so it really didn't change um who would end up running that thing, and I just disagree entirely. Um, it just feels like you have an opportunity to have someone represent you, and
Yeah.
I do admit when it comes to the sort of party political system that we have, it is arguably less important when it is those really local kind of council elections, who's the councillor that you're voting for,
Yeah.
because I feel like that is so much about a person that you're voting for, and sure they have a political affiliation, but
Yeah.
it doesn't, that I don't think changes much personally. That's my opinion.
No,
What do you
no,
think?
I don't think it does because obviously when it comes to general elections, you're voting for the seats who's most likely going to be in Parliament, and that is the big thing for like all over,
Right.
and for who's going to be making legislations and stuff like that. Whereas your local one, it is more about like just who you fancy in the seat at the time in your local area.
Yeah.
And I feel like you don't have to have, although you could have a political affiliation, you don't have to have it for your local councillors or your local
Yeah.
MSPs or MPs, wherever you are. And yeah, it's always better to vote for someone in that case that you just feel like you would be comfortable going to if you needed anything, MP wise.
Yeah. I think so. The reason I brought that up is because I don't necessarily know what the right answer is to this, and I was just interested to chat about. We say that on that really local level, you're voting for a person rather than a party.
Yeah,
I mean, even on this national level, it is still a local MP. They still represent you and your area.
yeah.
So ultimately, it is still the person that you're voting for. Um,
Hmm.
but I guess there are party like whips, that as they call them, like they are told they have to vote a certain way because they are affiliated with the party, or they lose the whip, as it's called.
Yeah.
So the that's where I think I find it challenging, because I absolutely am voting for a person.
Hmm.
However, I'm voting for a manifesto, really. I'm voting for what this party, this political party says they're going to do,
Yeah.
because ultimately that MP is going to have to vote in the party line often.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. Definitely when it comes to local ones, I vote for the person, but when it comes to like even though as a person in, I look at what the manifesto is and which one I agree with more. I know not everyone does that. I know especially when it comes to general elections and stuff, there are a lot of people that do tactical voting,
Yeah.
which is basically for anyone that doesn't know what tactical voting is, it's when you vote for the person who's most likely to beat the person you don't want to win
Yeah.
or to be in Parliament. So this is just an example. Say for this year, if people wanted the Conservatives out, they would vote locally, whatever they think, whoever they think is most likely to tip over the edge or to win in that constituency.
Right.
For example, mine's, as far as I know, is SNP for my constituency. They're more likely to be Conservatives than any of the other seats. So people would more like, even if it wasn't the manifesto that they wanted or agreed with completely, if the goal was just to get the Conservatives out, that is what they would do for voting tactically. No,
Yeah.
I'm not telling anyone go and vote this certain party to get the Conservatives out. You might not want that, and that's fine.
You really struggled to say that, didn't you? Hey, look, that's
But
part of
not
it,
her.
isn't it? It's true, if I mean, let's make no, like if some buts about it, it's not our political affiliation to vote for the Conservatives. However, I'm not telling people that they can't. I have opinions about you if you choose to. Um, but again, that's
It's your voting right. You use it how you wish.
absolutely. I genuinely would rather that there was 100% turnout, which let's face it, there's never going to be, but
No.
there was a huge turnout to voting and people voted for what they cared about. I would
Yeah.
far rather that than
Mhm.
people not voting at all. And I
Yeah.
think part of the reason that we decided to do this conversation was because I think if we're talking like blatantly about parties, it feels like Labour are just going to win, whatever that means. They're going to win
Yeah.
tomorrow. And I think, let's say that that is probably a given that by the end of the week, we will have a Labour Prime Minister and there will be a lot of Labour MPs. But that doesn't mean that you can't affect what happens for you in your area. You
Mhm.
you have options beyond the two that we've mentioned so far.
Yeah.
But also that might be what you so choose. And I think you mentioned manifestos when you were talking there. And I think sometimes it can feel a little alienating because people are like, yo, I have a life. I don't want to be consumed by all this politics bullshit.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to sit and read what is often like hundreds of pages of like this is our promises, and often some of these promises are quite hard to keep
Yeah.
because lots of them cost lots of money, and also the world is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
um I know when we had the brief conversation about this earlier this week, you had a suggestion for
Yes.
people that didn't want to read a full manifesto.
Yes. So well, I found it on TikTok. ITV Politics, I think it was, have all of the manifestos up with their key points. So if you wanted to just read through them, it only takes like a couple minutes for each one. So if you wanted to know to make an informed decision on who you're going to vote for, if you go into, in fact, I can find it for you, and I can tell you the exact name, the TikTok name, because my cousin was unsure of who she wanted to vote for, because she didn't really know anything that anyone did or anything like that. So I'd seen one just on my For You page. Yes, so it's ITV Politics. Their handle is at ITV Politics. And if you scroll down, you will find all the manifestos for each party, each political party. So, for example, this is just Labour's here. You just scroll through and it has all the key points. And there is Conservatives, Greens, Reform, and Lib Dems that I've seen. I am unsure if they have SNP, but obviously for those who are not in Scotland, that's probably not as applicable. Um, so yeah, there are ways to find just like carrying the narrow down key points of each manifesto, the important bits that we care about, that we give a shit about. Because you're right enough, sometimes when the manifestos come out, they come out and it's just a whole load of jargon.
Yeah.
So it's so much better when someone can break it down, because I feel like there's a big disconnect from politics, where people don't understand what's going on, don't care enough to understand what's going on because it's a bit of a shit show at the moment. Which I think most of us, whatever political affiliation you have, I think most of us can admit the political situation in the UK is a bit of a shit show. Not singling out anyone, but
But
it
I think people generally feel a little disenfranchised, perhaps,
for sure.
because a lot of front-right politicians feel like they perhaps uh, don't stand up for things that they believe in, or just point blank have refused to represent, I guess, the people that they apparently represent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand why people perhaps that maybe leads you to not wanting to even vote because you feel like that is a difference made.
Yeah, well, what's the point? I know a lot of people view politicians as people who are only out for themselves, and don't actually care about their constituency and their people, that don't actually care about the position that they're supposed to be in. And I think a lot of people do feel like any politician from any party, there's a lack of trust there, just with so many things that have happened in the past, not just the last few years, but the last few decades, um, of what's going on in politics. I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't see the point in voting because I don't like anyone, and I don't think anyone's going to make a difference at this point, which is a completely valid viewpoint from past experiences. We only learn through experience. So
True.
it's difficult. It's difficult to get people to actually want to go out and vote and make a difference, because I think a lot of people don't. But I think a lot of people believe that, what difference am I going to make?
And I think that is such a valid way of thinking, and I'm not going to dispute that for anyone. What I
Hmm.
would dispute is that if you choose to not go and vote, then you have made no difference to your local area or local people or yourself, really.
Hmm.
Because if you end up with a party or a person that doesn't necessarily hold what you want or believe, and if you were to have a situation in which you need to your MP's help, which does happen, and that is what they're actually there for,
Hmm.
then if they don't see perhaps eye to eye with you, that could be challenging. So I implore people to go and have a flick through those manifestos, those key policies.
Yeah.
Um, Even I guess for some people, you might still go, that's too much for me. I just want to turn up, put an X in a box and leave. Fine. Do
Yeah.
that. Do that. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But maybe knowing what those people stand for is great.
Hmm.
I have another friend that I guess is a mutual friend of ours now because he's done this podcast, the Queer
Yeah.
Confab, with you a couple of times now, Jack, who
Yes.
has emailed his MP a couple of times recently about various things. Because you can look up if you're voting for someone that is currently your MP, you can look up their voting history online, and see how they've voted on issues that you care about in Parliament when bills are going through, when laws are being passed, etc., etc. Um, and he disagreed with some of the things that his local MP had voted for,
Yeah.
because they didn't necessarily align with Jack's belief, and he had voted for her. And he's well within his right to contact his MP about those things and
Hmm.
question her on it. Um, and I think that's wonderful. And she did reply to him,
Hmm.
um, because they're a public servant, right? They are, and we're the public.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess accountability is lovely, but this is part of that accountability. Right now
Yeah.
is the option for you to have someone that you feel like you can hold accountable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
we mentioned some disillusion of voting.
Yes.
It feels like this election that's about to happen, um, the one in 2019, the last general election that we had, was a little bit like a right versus left type scenario of, do you want this particularly left leaning leader, or would you like this sort of center right party that has drifted further to the right in the last few
Hmm.
years? And sure, one of those parties won, the other one really did not. And there's been lots of change, and perhaps those two parties have changed what they stand for considerably in the last 5 years,
Hmm.
um, which I think is a fair statement. However, I don't think this really feels like it comes down to that sort of polarized viewpoint anymore. And I think the joy for me, at least as a voter, is the party that I've always wanted to vote for. I
Hmm.
get to vote for this year
Yeah.
because I mean, just again, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't vote for anyone, but me personally, I will be voting for the Greens tomorrow, which is really exciting because I've always wanted to vote for the Greens, but it always felt like it came down to, oh, I've got to vote for Labour, I have to,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like that anymore, and I really, because I've read their manifesto, I really don't want to vote for Labour, and that's my own personal viewpoint, but I I like that I feel like I'm making a vote for what I think is the greater good for a change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, like, if you're worried about voting for a party because you don't feel like they're going to get in anywhere, the thing is with the voting, it highlights where the public stands. So if you do say vote for a certain party that you feel like not gonna 100% win it, if there's an offshoot of the amount of vote, people will be aware of that and be like, oh, people actually want this kind of thing to be happening. So
Right.
yes, okay, they've not won it, but there's still that opportunity for it to be like, people clearly want this more than they did before for the fact that they're actually going out and voting for it. Full transparency, I too am a Green Party voter. Again, we're not trying to sway anyone. We're not trying to. That's
It's
why
actually a fluke.
yeah, yes, it genuinely is. And but this is also the first year that I am voting Greens. Because for me, I didn't want to do tactical. I wanted to do which manifesto I believed in the most,
Yeah.
and which one aligned with me, which is that. And I feel like you're right. We have swayed slightly further away from the not two-party system, but it basically has been a two-party system
Yeah.
for many years. Apart from that one fluke of a year that was Blood Gems, and
Yeah,
I
I mean,
hated.
the UK political history we could talk about forever, but it
Mhm.
is bizarre that it sort of was never a two-party system, and then
Yeah.
it's the last couple of years we've had this swing to almost like American presidential style elections, um,
Mhm.
and I feel like some younger voters perhaps maybe don't know they are not voting for Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer
Yeah.
unless those are your local MPs,
Yeah.
running to be your local MPs. Like
Yeah.
you're not voting for those people at all,
No, they're just the face of the party,
right?
and that's it. Like the prime minister is, it's just someone that can sign off on things, basically. They always need a face, someone who's in that top kind of position, but you're not actually, when you cast a vote for them, it's not them that you're specifically voting for, it's the party itself and where the party stands on issues.
Right. And absolutely the leader has plenty of say in that.
Mhm.
Um, but Zoe's completely right. It's that, isn't it? You're voting for um a local person with local beliefs. What's that TV show? Oh my God, what is that? That's oh, this is a local bar for local people. The League of Gentlemen.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
We've zoomed through most of this list already. We've kind of talked a little bit about right versus left and disillusion of voting. We've talked a little bit about what tactical voting is and why you may choose to do that.
Mhm.
We've kind of talked about the two-party system that's in place and how really there are lots of other options if those two parties are particularly um, unengaging for you. Um,
Mhm.
and voting for your MP. There's two big things that we haven't even talked about at all. One is democracy. It's like it's your right to vote. It's not
Yeah.
legally your obligation to vote like it is in other countries. So
Yeah.
in other countries, you have to vote. You are fined if you don't vote. And in some senses, it's a lovely thing that it's still our choice to vote here.
Mhm.
Um, and I personally believe that you should absolutely take that opportunity up because it's a wonderful thing to be allowed to have say in your country. Um, and it's interesting at the start of this week. So obviously, it's Car Crash, we're a theatre company here. There's a excerpt from a piece called Democracy that was released this week, and the concept of that show is that you have to vote, and
Mhm.
you get told you have to vote. However, it goes one step further, and you're also then told who you need to vote for. Um, so there's beauty in the freedom of actual democracy that we are allowed to choose to vote tomorrow.
Mhm.
Um, I I think it's a shame, however, that there are plenty of people who are not allowed to vote. Which brings me on to one of the only other 2 points I even have written here, which
Yeah.
is that we need to now, as of last year, bring ID with us to vote. So if you are going to vote tomorrow, take ID because you will
Yeah.
not be allowed to vote otherwise. It is now a legal obligation to have a passport or a driver's license or something, and I have really strong opinions about that I just can't hold back. I think that's terrible. I think it is shocking. because there are so many people that do not have a form of ID, like a passport or a driver's license, photo ID, who are legal residents of the country before anyone's like, well, that's why they don't have it. They are perfectly legal, but passports run out. And some people have never had them because they've never had the
And
kind of
they haven't had a need to. They don't travel
exactly.
abroad, so why do they need a passport?
And similarly, lots of people don't drive. So if those are our two key forms of photo ID in the UK, it is highly conceivable that some people just don't have the means to do that. And of course, they both cost money. So it feels like, personally, my view of that is that it feels like there's this drive to a class divide when it comes to that vote. That I can only profess that as my opinion. Zoe, I'm interested. How do you feel about voter IDing?
So it's interesting because I've never been an in-person voter. I've always been a postal voter. Yeah, I'm a postal voter. I don't want to go. I want to decide and throw it in so I don't need to worry about it on the day because as a forgetful person, I'd forget to go. So if it's there in front of me, I can just sign it off and send it off. But I do remember going to voting polling stations with my mum.
Right.
I always went when my mum went every time, mostly because it was in my primary school, and I just went to see if my teachers were there so I could say hi to them and it was schooling. But as far as I remember, it was always just your name was on a list.
That's right.
Yeah,
And you maybe take your polling card, but you didn't even need to take
yeah.
that.
No, you didn't need to take it. As long as your name was on the list, you just gave your name, and that was it. And
because
I felt
there's
like,
still ways to ID via that. They would
yeah,
say, "Can you tell me your postcode?"
yeah.
Or tell me the first line of your address or something like that. There's plenty of ways that that is an identity for that. You go to a bank, they don't ask for your passport. They
Mhm.
ask, "Can you tell me your address?" Or "Can you
Yeah,
answer this security question?" Sorry, go on,
yeah.
sorry, I
Yeah,
interrupted.
no, you're that was literally my point was what was the problem with it before? Like why all of a sudden do we now need to have specific IDs to come in when before you had all the addresses, etc. And people could vote that way. And I don't understand why this has now been brought in. And I do quite agree that it seems to be like a bit of a class divide or the trying to like square away certain people from not voting, even though it's meant to be a right for many people in this country
Right.
to do. So why is there some more barriers put in place? Like why is there extra barriers? I don't understand that. If any political party member can explain to me why this works better than it did before, sure, go ahead. But no, I think I'm on the same boat as you. Like it just seems like they're putting in another barrier, and I don't know if there's something shady about it.
Yeah. It feels
Obviously,
like
I don't know the facts. I can't say that are facts, but I can say that I have suspicions.
that. Detective Zoe. um, yeah, I think it's disappointing. I think there are plenty of people who can't vote in this country for various reasons anyway.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh my God, am I one of those people? Probably not, to be honest. It's people like the royals, they can't vote. It's
Oh, I can't vote then because I'm a queen.
you are a queen,
Mm.
slay. You also if you have like a domestic criminal record of some nature,
Mhm.
etc. Like there's plenty of reasons that you can't vote. Um, However, um, I just some of them I even question. I understand. I'm never going to question why the royals can't vote because they essentially have a political non-bias.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
actually. So yeah, I that makes sense to me. But yeah, it's bizarre. MPs can go and vote for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, there's a wonderful bit in a TV show called Parks and Rec, where there's this silly character that Paul Rudd plays, and he's
Mhm.
like, I get to vote? Wow! As he's like running. And he's like, well, I'm gonna vote for you then, Leslie, because you're great. And Leslie's like, you can vote for yourself. And he's like, why would I do that? You're so much better. But,
That's so
it's
funny.
a great show.
That's so
But
funny. You know what I'm interested to hear? I know we're meant to be having a discussion about like going and voting, which is still our point. But I'm interested to hear how you feel about certain ages voting. You know, like they're talking about possibly lowering the ages of voting, and then there is kind of some debate around should there be an age limit on voting? You know, I how what's your kind of stance on that? I'm just interested because I was just thinking it in my head just now, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
That'd be kind of interesting to talk about.
It's interesting because there, like, statistically is a divide between ages. It feels like the older you get, the more likely that you are to vote in a specific direction,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah.
Um, and fine. I think that I'm not that age, and I just can't really, I can't tell you why that happens, other than perhaps your interests and what you care about change as you get older, as the world
Mhm.
changes.
No, 100%. Yes.
So to that end, I don't think there should be an upper limit on it ever,
Yeah.
because I just think
Okay.
that's bizarre. Um, I do think it makes complete sense for 16-year-olds to vote.
Mhm.
In the same way that when someone tells me their argument is, but they're not an adult yet, they can't do X, Y, and Z, and you're like, wow, they, with their parents' permission, can get married. Um, they can have a criminal record. They can have had prison time. They can own a goldfish, which is a thing that you have to be a certain age to do. But all these things that you can do when you're 16, and if you can do those things, if you can, like, for instance, if you can get married, why can't you vote for the people that then change things about marriage, for instance?
Yeah.
Um, I think it's bizarre. I think it's fantastic in Scotland that we have that, but I think it's just always perplexed me why you have to be 18 um, to vote.
Mhm.
Um, that's my take on it. What do you think?
Well, I'm in the same boat where I think the age could be lowered. Like if you're old enough, especially in Scotland, to get married at 16, it means you're old enough to like make adult decisions and think about, you know, um so I can definitely see like the argument for lowering the age. I know there are people that argue that maybe 16-year-olds aren't like mature enough
Sure.
to make decisions about the country, but it's like realistically, let's be honest, it's only for the next like 4 years. You know, it's not like it's a apart from things like breakfast,
Breakfast.
like Brexit and the Scottish independence referendum, where it's usually like a one-time thing, etc. But when it comes to general elections and stuff, I don't see why their opinions can't be heard. I don't think it should be any lower than 16. I think that's kind of pushing it. But 16 is like verging on becoming an adult in the eyes of the law. So why not give them that right as well? Upper age limit. I've heard people, I've heard people use the excuse of, well, they're going to be going soon, so why are they voting? You know, do you know what I mean? Like, why are
Brutal.
they voting when they're not even going to be around to see how it's affected it for the rest of us? Um, I do feel like the prime age for voting is definitely like the the 18 from or even like 25 to 30 odd, you know what I mean? Like the prime, because we've experienced like previous being adult, and then we're going on to have all the repercussions of where the younger they are, they're not going to understand the same repercussions, but we really notice the difference. And I think that's the same for like every time it kind of rolls around, there's that certain age that I'm not saying anyone outside of that age shouldn't vote, but I feel like it hits them hardest, like how it turns out. You know, do you know what I mean?
I
Uh,
sort of do. I
yeah,
don't think I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I don't think there's a prime age for voting necessarily. I think your opinion matters as much if you're 69 or if you're
yeah,
29.
yeah.
Um,
I
uh,
just mean like that's the kind of the age bracket where we're gonna feel the full effects of it for the whole. You know what
I
I
do.
mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I
Yeah.
think, there's generational trauma of any generation, and sure, because we're in the age group that you're talking about,
Hmm.
um, I think perhaps that's maybe where that feeling comes from,
Yeah.
because, um, yeah, we'll feel it through the rest of our lives. But a 16-year-old voting will also feel that when they're 5 years later, and
Yeah.
that party's still in power, making decisions about their lives. They're like 24, they're an adult, they're living their life, doing shit. No, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21. They're 21. They're living their life.
21. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess because like even the way that universities work has been vastly changed. And I mean, you know about this because you're leaving your university tomorrow, with
Hmm.
a hat, and um, but yeah, I mean the people that are in university have presumably been exceptionally affected by how the government has changed things about universities recently.
And I think it's going to hit harder in the next couple of years as well,
Right.
because there are a lot of changes in a lot of the universities at the moment, particularly in regards to international students because of Brexit,
Yeah.
which was what are we doing? Oh no, put away! Why are we doing this right now? We're meant to be talking about voting.
Think
Not
of her when you
me.
vote.
Yeah, so there will be like a lot of big changes coming up for a lot of universities. It's a kind of like a not a scary time, but like like oh, what's the word for it? Apprehensive.
Yeah.
An apprehensive time. And that is due to a political decision that was obviously made. I keep kicking my desk. That's my screen keeps shaking. So yeah, although things might not hit straight away, they do, a little
Yeah.
bit further down the line, you do start to feel the repercussions.
And I think when it does come to voting, if like it's very rich of us to say, oh, go and read the manifesto, go and read what they think on all these topics, read the highlights. Actually, if one issue matters to you, if you're like, you know what, it's university that matters to me, or it's pensions that matter to me, or
Mhm.
it's I don't know, whatever, the environment, the women's rights, LGBTQ rights, whatever it is that is particularly important to you, vote for that. Vote for the party that you think is going to provide the best that.
Yeah,
Um, and I think I you hear of there's X spoiled votes or X votes that can't be counted, and I always wonder about spoiled votes because they've made the effort to go along, and I know people that have spoiled their vote before. That if that sorry, I know you know Zoe, but for those that don't know, a spoiled vote is essentially when you do anything on the paper except put a cross in the box for the person
yeah.
you voted for.
It can
Um,
even be as simple as putting a tick in the box instead of
yeah,
a cross.
and I know people that have done it on purpose because
Mhm.
they are so disenfranchised with all the people on that paper. They're like, I'm not voting for any of them, and
Yeah,
that's why I say if that is the case for you, I'm really sorry that that's how you are feeling. And I absolutely say yes, it is the political system that has done that. But there are people that want to make positive change on that voting card, and there are some that aren't. There's some that really don't want to make positive change on that voting card, and you can decide who those people are and aren't yourself. But um, you should vote for the one that feels like it's gonna make the world a better place.
yeah, the one that you vibe with the best.
Yeah,
Yeah, go on the vibes. Vibes for voting.
vibes for voting.
I should
um,
vote in vibes.
oh, do you
Yeah.
feel ready to vote tomorrow?
I'm not voting tomorrow.
Have you? So you did do a postal vote as
Yeah,
well.
I've done my postal vote. It's already
Oh,
sent off.
before we finish, then we should talk about postal votes because
Yeah.
there's this whole thing at the moment with postal votes, isn't there?
There's been a big issue up in Scotland with postal votes not arriving uh, in time. So I think up till as late as like yesterday, people still hadn't received their postal votes. I'm not sure how the situation has gone in England, but there's been a lot of places, specifically up in Aberdeen actually, that haven't. You know what? I'll go on to because there has been if you are in that situation where you have not received your postal vote, there is a post. So it says UK government is urgently investigating general election postal ballot delays. Anyone who does not receive their postal vote between now and Thursday can still vote at a polling station. Many Scottish voters will have no access to their postal vote due to delays of not being received by the post in time. Many are from areas with Scottish schools that broke up last week for the school summer break and now on their holidays. If you have not received your postal vote yet, please can you comment that you don't need to comment on this post, but if you have not received your postal vote in Scotland, you can take ID to the polling station and still vote. So your vote can still be heard, even though you were supposed to be postal vote, because they will understand that there has been issues with the postal voting.
Yeah.
So if you've not received it, still go along and vote. I was lucky enough that I did receive mine, luckily. And I sent it away last week just to make sure it was there in plenty of time. So yeah, if you don't receive your or you haven't received your postal vote, still go to your polling station, explain the situation, and you will still be allowed to vote. Just make sure you take your ID, because if you're at a polling station, you have to have valid ID. But postal votes I prefer because, like I said, I'm very forgetful, so I would sometimes forget, and I don't like to stand in queues for long. And also sometimes I get a little bit agoraphobic if there's a lot of people in one room and it's tiny and I can't see an escape route. So that's why I postal vote instead. It just saves me some trouble.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we haven't mentioned, so polling stations are open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
To 10 p.m., yeah.
Quite a long window, I would say.
Mhm.
So even if you're like, oh man, I work from 9 to 5, you're like, chill. You can
Yeah.
go before 9 a.m.
Before or after.
5 p.m.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. The job I'm doing at the moment, we have to be in at work at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So we were all talking about how do you manage to vote, because we're finishing at like 10 o'clock tomorrow night. So we have that really tight window, but it exists. We can go and do that in the morning. And I think we're all really aware that it's important to go and do it. So we're making sure we do it. And hey, if people are slightly late, it is what it is. Like it's more important that people have gone and let their voice be heard. So, but that's the joy of working in theatre, is that
That's
the
so
hours
true.
are long, but everyone's understanding.
Yeah. Well, you can't have it all, you know what I mean? Like, unless you're me. That was a lie. That was an absolute lie.
That was crazy. Wow. What a statement to end with.
What
Um, what is your message to the people? I want your party political broadcast now, Zoe. What is your like defining statement for tomorrow?
Look over there. No, I'm kidding. My political party statement for voting tomorrow is go vote, bitches.
Smashed it.
Bitches and hoes, bows, hoes.
Is that where we're at in the year already? That we're really there. Mine is go and vote for what matters tomorrow to you.
Bitches.
And bitches, but make sure you do it. Like, make sure you go and vote, whoever that is that you've so chosen to vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Post shizzle.
If you've joined us for this whole thing, if you're watching it back, if you're looking for guidance late at night as to who to go and vote for tomorrow, sorry that we can't be of any help. You can visit our own personal profiles if you so wish for help. But also there's lots and lots of wonderful resources out there, like the one that Zoe's mentioned. There's also some great resources where you can type in your postcode and it tells you everyone that's running in your local area. And it also has links to all their manifestos there. So just hop on Google. I promise the answers might be there. Yeah, happy voting, everyone.
Yeah. See you on Friday. Don't know whether we'll laugh or